You're standing in front of your thermostat right now, and I already know the feeling in your gut. You touch that little dial, you nudge it up 2 degrees, and somewhere in the back of your mind you can hear the meter spinning faster. That fear of the next bill, that quiet resentment every time the furnace kicks on. I lived with that for 30 years. Then I spent one January inside an Amish farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio, and everything I believed about heating a home fell apart. Here is the claim, and I know how it sounds. These families keep their homes warm through the hardest Ohio winter on roughly half the fuel you and I burn, and it is not because they suffer through the cold. It is because they understand one principle about heat that the modern furnace industry quietly buried. The Amish never forgot it because they never plugged into the system that made everyone else forget. And I am going to hand you the whole thing. There is a method written down in a book from 1909 that almost nobody alive has read, and it is the piece that cuts the bill in half. Stay with me because this works in a regular house with a regular furnace, using things already sitting in your kitchen tonight. Let me tell you what I saw first, because that is where my doubt started to crack. I walked into that farmhouse expecting to shiver. It was maybe 11 degrees outside, wind coming straight across the fields, and I had my coat buttoned to the throat. I stepped through the door, and the warmth hit me like walking into July. Not stuffy, not dry, just deep, even, solid warmth. And I looked around for the source, expecting to hear a furnace roaring somewhere in a basement. There was no furnace. There was one stove in the main room, one, and this old cast iron thing was not even burning hard. It was ticking along low and quiet, and yet the whole downstairs was warm. I stood there confused, because it made no sense to me. In my own house, I ran a furnace rated to heat twice that square footage, and my living room still had a cold corner I could never fix. So how was one small stove, barely working, doing what my expensive system could not? The man of the house watched me figuring it out, and he smiled a little. He put his hand flat on the wall behind the stove, a wall of old brick, and he told me to feel it. It was warm, not near the stove. The wall itself was warm, all the way through, like it had soaked up the heat and was breathing it back out slow. That was the first clue, and it flipped everything I thought I knew. Here is what I learned, and it took me months of digging to really understand it. My furnace, and almost certainly yours, heats air. It blows hot air into a room, and hot air is the single worst thing you could ever try to store heat in. Hot air rises, it leaks out through every gap around a door, every window frame, every recessed light in the ceiling. You are, quite literally, paying to heat air that is on its way out of your house within minutes. The moment that furnace shuts off, the warmth is gone and the cold comes rushing back, so the furnace kicks on again and again, all night long. The Amish do not heat air, they heat mass. That brick behind the stove, the cast iron of the stove itself, the stone, the heavy materials all around that fire, they soak up heat and hold it. Thermal mass, the engineers call it. And here is the number that stopped me cold when I found it. A single cubic foot of brick or stone can hold something like 30 times more heat than the same amount of air. 30 times. So while my furnace was frantically reheating air that kept escaping, that Amish family had walls and stone and iron gently radiating stored warmth for hours after the fire died down. That is why the stove was barely working. It did not need to work hard. The house itself had become the heater, and I want you to sit with what that means for your money, because this is the part that made me angry. Every time your furnace short cycles, kicks on, blasts hot air, shuts off, and kicks on again 20 minutes later, that startup is the most fuel-hungry moment of the whole cycle. You are paying premium fuel prices for a warmth that vanishes almost as fast as you make it. The Amish home I stood in had eliminated that waste entirely, not with technology, but with an old, patient understanding of where heat actually wants to live. But heating mass was only the first door, because I still could not explain why the far rooms of that house were not freezing. So I started asking questions, and the answer they gave me was so simple it almost embarrassed me. They told me they do not heat rooms nobody is standing in. Now that sounds obvious when you hear it out loud, but think about your own house right this minute. You are heating bedrooms that are empty until 10 at night. You are heating a guest room nobody has slept in since Thanksgiving. You are heating a hallway, a laundry room, a formal dining room you use 4 times a year. Your furnace treats your entire house as one single space, and it will not rest until every cubic foot of it hits the same number on the dial. The Amish think that is madness, and once I understood it, so do I. In that farmhouse, life happened in one big warm room. The kitchen and the main living space flowed together around that stove, and that is where the family lived through the winter. Cooking, sewing, reading, homework at the table, the babies playing on the floor. The doors to the unused rooms stayed shut. Those rooms were cold, and nobody cared, because nobody was in them. They call it living close in the winter, and it is the way nearly every family on this continent lived before central heating convinced us we needed every square foot of the house to be 72 degrees at all times. I went and dug into the old farmhouse designs from the 1800s because of this, and it confirmed everything. Those old homes were built with something we threw away. Doors between every single room, not open floor plans. Doors, you closed off the parlor, you closed off the stairs with a curtain or a door at the bottom to keep the warm air downstairs where the people were. The whole house was designed to be divided up and heated in pieces, like watertight compartments in a ship. We knocked all those walls down for the open concept look, and in doing it, we made our homes almost impossible to heat efficiently. We built ourselves a problem and then bought a bigger furnace to solve it. Here is what that cost you, and this is where I started to see who really benefits. Heating a whole open house to one uniform temperature, day and night, empty rooms and all, is the single most expensive way to stay warm that has ever been invented. And it became the standard not because it was good for you, but because it was good for the people selling the fuel. A furnace that heats your entire house all winter burns a great deal more fuel than a family living close around one warm stove. Every empty room you heat tonight is money flowing straight out of your pocket and into theirs. I sat with that, and I felt foolish, because I had done it their way for 3 decades and never once questioned it. But then I hit the part of my investigation that truly surprised me, because I assumed the Amish just burned more wood to make up the difference. I figured, fine, they are efficient, but they have got barns full of firewood and I have got a gas bill. So I asked about the wood, thinking I had found the catch, and the answer showed me I had it completely backwards. The wood matters more than the stove. The man told me that most people who burn wood are burning it wrong, and they have no idea. They cut a tree, they split it, and within a few months they are burning it. And that wood is soaking wet on the inside, even if it feels dry to the touch. Fresh-cut green wood can be 45 to 50% water by weight. Think about that. Half of what you are trying to burn is water. And here is what happens when you burn wet wood. Before the wood can give you any heat at all, the fire has to boil off all that water first. Your fire spends its energy turning that trapped moisture into steam, and it goes straight up the chimney and does nothing for you. You are burning fuel to cook water out of your own firewood. It is like trying to boil a pot on the stove with the lid off in a cold wind. You are fighting yourself the whole time. I went and pulled the research on this because the numbers sounded too dramatic. Penn State Extension and the University of Missouri Extension have both studied firewood moisture, and the findings are brutal. Properly seasoned wood, dried down to around 20% moisture, gives you dramatically more usable heat per piece than green wood, and some of the extension figures put the wasted energy in unseasoned wood at close to 1/3 or more of its potential, gone, up the flue as steam. 1/3 of your fuel wasted because it was not dry. The Amish season their wood for a full year, sometimes 2. They split it, they stack it loose so the air moves through, they keep the top covered from rain but leave the sides open to the wind, and they let time do the work. By the time it goes in the stove, it is light in the hand, the bark is falling off, and the split ends have cracks spreading across them like a spider web. That is the sign. When you see those cracks, the wood is ready. It catches fast, it burns hot and clean, and almost none of your fuel is wasted drying itself out. And this is the thing about the whole Amish approach that finally clicked for me. It is not one clever trick. It is 3 simple ideas stacked together. Heat the mass, not the air. Heat the people, not the empty rooms. And burn dry fuel, not wet. Each one alone saves you something. All 3 together is how one small stove keeps a farmhouse warm through an Ohio January on half the fuel of a modern home. Now, I know exactly what you are thinking, because I thought it too, standing in that warm kitchen. You are thinking, that is wonderful for them, but I do not have a wood stove. I do not have a brick wall. I have got a thermostat on the wall and a furnace in the basement, and I rent, or I cannot go tearing my house apart. So let me stop right here and talk to you directly, because this next part is for you in the house you are sitting in tonight, exactly as it is. And that is the whole thing, is it not? But before I go further, I want to tell you how I pulled all of this together in one place. Everything I uncovered in those farmhouses, the thermal mass, the living close, the seasoned wood, the fireless cooker, and a great deal more that I could not fit into one video, I wrote it all down in a book called Plain Wisdom. It goes deeper than I can go here, and it gives you the complete Amish blueprint for running a household that costs you far less than the modern system ever intended. If this kind of knowledge is what you have been looking for, the link to find it is in the description below. It is the kind of thing you read once and keep going back to every winter. Now, back to that fireless cooker and why this knowledge was never truly lost, only buried. You do not need a wood stove to use every one of these principles. You need to understand what they are actually doing, and then you copy the effect with what you already own. Start with heating the people, not the whole house. Tonight, walk through your home and find the rooms nobody is using right now. The guest room, the spare room, the formal dining room. Close the vents in those rooms and shut the doors. You have just told your furnace to stop wasting fuel on empty space. It is the closing off the parlor trick from 1850, done with a vent lever and a door. Costs you nothing. Do it tonight. Then bring the warmth down to where your body actually is. The Amish live close around one heat source, so do the same. In the evening, when the family is together in one room, that is the room that needs to be warm, not the whole floor. Drop your thermostat a few degrees for the whole house and warm the one room you are in with a single small space heater aimed at the people. A person feels warm from direct radiant heat long before the air temperature catches up. You will be perfectly comfortable while the furnace barely runs. Now here is my favorite one, because it is pure Amish thinking, and almost nobody does it. If you have got radiators or baseboard heaters along an outside wall, go feel that wall behind them. It is cold, which means a good share of your heat is being absorbed straight into that outside wall and pushed out into the winter. So put a reflector behind the heater. You can buy a radiator reflector panel, or you can do what I did the first time and tape a sheet of rigid foil-faced foam board behind it, shiny side facing the room. That reflected heat comes back into your living space instead of warming the neighborhood. Extension studies on this have shown meaningful reductions in heat loss through the wall behind a radiator, and it costs a few dollars in 20 minutes. And you can fake thermal mass too. This is the one people never believe until they try it. Fill some jugs or jars with water and set them in the room where you spend your evenings. Somewhere they catch the warmth. Water holds heat beautifully, far better than air. As the room warms, that water quietly soaks up heat, and when the furnace clicks off, the water gives it back slowly, and it evens out the whole room. It stops that awful cycle where the room is warm 1 minute and cold the next. A few gallons of water is a poor man's brick wall, and it works. Then close the house up the way those old farmhouses were built to close up. Heavy curtains on the windows, drawn the moment the sun goes down, because a bare window at night bleeds heat straight through the glass. If you have Got a curtain or a door you can pull across a staircase, do it, and keep your warm air on the floor where you live instead of letting it float up to heat the ceiling of your bedrooms all evening. None of this takes a contractor. None of this takes money you do not have. This is the Amish winter, translated into your house, and you can start it before you go to bed tonight. Now here's where my investigation took the turn I was not expecting. Because everything I have told you so far is about heating your home. But when I went looking into where the Amish really squeeze fuel out of their day, the trail led somewhere I never thought to look. The stove they cook on. And this is the piece I promised you at the start. This is the one written down in a book most people have never heard of. I was in an Amish kitchen, and there was a pot of stew that I knew had been simmering for the meal, except the stove under it was cold. Dead cold. And that pot was wrapped up and tucked inside a wooden box packed with what looked like old blankets and cushions. I asked what in the world that was, and the woman told me it was where the food cooked itself while she was out doing chores. She had brought it to a boil on the stove for just a few minutes that morning, then sealed it in that box, and the box did the rest. Hours of cooking. No fuel at all. I thought she was pulling my leg. So I went home and I dug. And what I found was a whole forgotten technology that this country used to know cold. It is called the fireless cooker, and it is not folk myth. There is a book, printed in 1909, called The Fireless Cookbook, written by a woman named Margaret Johns Mitchell, and it laid out the whole method in detail for the American household. During the First World War, when fuel was scarce, and every scrap of coal and wood was needed for the war, the government actively encouraged families to build and use these fireless cookers to save fuel. It was patriotic. It was everywhere. And then cheap gas and electricity came flooding in. The fuel companies had everything to gain from you leaving the burner on, and this beautiful, thrifty, brilliant method just quietly disappeared. Nobody banned it. It was simply buried under the promise of convenience, and a couple of generations later, almost no one remembers it ever existed. The Amish never let it go, because they never took the bait. Here is how it actually works, and why it is not magic, it is just physics. When you cook a pot of soup, or beans, or a stew, or oatmeal, or a roast, you do not actually need the burner on the whole time. You only need enough heat to bring it up to temperature. After that, all the burner is doing is replacing the heat that leaks out of the pot into the kitchen air. That leaking heat is pure waste, and you are paying for every minute of it. The fireless cooker stops the leak. You bring your pot to a hard boil on the stove for a few minutes, just long enough to get everything up to full temperature. Then you take that pot, lid on tight, and you bury it in heavy insulation, a box packed with cushions, blankets, towels, even crumpled newspaper. The heat cannot escape. So the food stays at cooking temperature for hours, and it keeps right on cooking, slowly and gently, using nothing but the heat you already put into it. No fuel, no flame, no electricity. No watching the pot. No danger of anything burning or boiling dry. And you can build one this weekend, tonight even, from things you already own. This is the part I need you to hear. Get yourself a cooler, one of those insulated picnic coolers, or even just a cardboard box lined thick with old towels and blankets. Take your heaviest pot with a tight lid, a Dutch oven is perfect, and make your soup or your stew the way you always do. Bring it to a rolling boil on the stove. Let it boil hard for maybe 5 to 10 minutes to drive the heat deep into everything. Then, quick before it loses that heat, lid it tight and nest it down inside the cooler, packed all around, top and bottom and sides, with towels so no gap is left. Close it up and walk away. Come back in 3, 4, 5 hours and your dinner is done. Fully cooked, hot, tender, using a fraction of the fuel you would have burned letting it simmer on the stove all afternoon. I have done it with beans that came out perfect. I have done it with a beef stew that fell apart on the fork. The first time it worked, I actually laughed out loud in my own kitchen because I had been paying to run that burner for hours my entire adult life for no reason at all. Think about how much cooking in your week is really just something held at a simmer. Soups, stocks, stews, chili, dried beans, oatmeal in the morning, rice, pot roast. Every one of those can be brought to a boil for a few minutes and then finished for free inside that box. The Amish woman I met had been doing it her whole life and thought nothing of it. To her, it was just common sense. To me, it was a revelation I had to travel to Ohio and read a book from 1909 to find. And that is the whole thing, is it not? That is what this really is. This knowledge was never lost because it stopped working. It works as well today as it did in 1909, as well as it did in that farmhouse kitchen last winter. It was pushed aside on purpose, because there is no profit in a family that heats one warm room, burns dry wood, and cooks its dinner in a box of blankets with the stove turned off. There is enormous profit in a family that heats every empty room, all night, forever, and leaves the burner running. That family is a customer for life. The Amish quietly refused to be that customer, and they kept the old knowledge alive on their farms while the rest of us forgot we ever had it. Now you have it too. Not a theory, not nostalgia. A set of things you can do starting tonight. Close the doors on the empty rooms. Put a reflector behind your heater. Set a few jugs of water in the room where you live. Draw the heavy curtains at dark. Season your wood a full year if you burn it. And this weekend, build yourself a fireless cooker out of a cooler and some old towels and taste what free cooking heat actually feels like. You feel that? That little spark of getting something back that was quietly taken from you. That is the feeling of standing on your own 2 feet again, warming your home and feeding your family on your own good sense instead of somebody else's meter. You are the kind of person who trusts what works over what is sold, who would rather understand a thing with your own hands than pay forever to have it done for you. That is exactly who these methods were made for. So, let me ask you one thing, and I truly want your answer. When you build that fireless cooker this weekend, what is the first thing you are going to cook in it? A pot of beans? A stew? Your morning oatmeal? Tell me in the comments, because I read them, and I want to know what you try first. And while you are there, tell me where in the world you are watching from, because it warms me to know who is out there listening. If tonight gave you back even one thing you thought you had to keep paying for, then come stand with the rest of us who are quietly digging up what was buried and putting it back to work in ordinary homes. Subscribe and stay close, because the next thing I uncovered is how the Amish keep food from spoiling for months without a refrigerator running. And there is one root cellar trick from the 1800s that I could not believe still works in a modern basement. You are going to want to be here for that one. I'm going to stop here, but I'm not done. Inside the Plain Living Circle, I pick up right where this video left off, walking you through the thermal mass retrofit room by room. And if something doesn't fit your house, you ask me directly, and I answer myself, no machine. You'd belong among thousands of plain living folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime with one click.